They weren't loud, they weren't late, they were just next in line. Two teenage girls, same matching hoodies, same seat row, same last name. No one was paying attention at first. A few glances maybe, nothing more. But when they stepped forward, things stopped moving. The gate agent didn't ask for names, didn't scan a single ticket, only said flatly, "Where are your parents?" That's where it started. Within minutes, they were standing off to the side while other passengers walked past, staring like they were already guilty. A second agent came over. Then security. No explanation, no interest in hearing one either. Two girls, 16 years old, pulled from a gate they had every right to board and treated like a problem that needed to be moved out of sight. Not one person in uniform asked why they were flying. Not one asked who they were flying to meet. Because they didn't know who booked those seats, and they definitely didn't know who was about to answer the phone. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ. And in the comments, let us know where in the world you're watching from. Your voice matters here. The airline thought they were removing passengers. They were about to lose much more than 2 seats, because one of those girls made a call. And what followed left a $3.2 billion deal in ruins. All because someone didn't think they belonged. Imani and Amara Sinclair were identical, but anyone paying attention could tell them apart. Imani was quiet precision, always building something, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Amara, the firecracker. She had a voice that cut through noise and a presence that made people pause. But both of them, brilliant. Disciplined, unshakable. That wasn't luck. That was the Sinclair household. Their father, Charles Sinclair, didn't believe in raising daughters who needed rescuing. He believed in raising daughters who knew when to act and when to own the room. Charles built his legacy from nothing. From a windowless office in Oakland to the top floor of a global logistics company, Transsion Systems, one of the most sought-after AI partners in modern supply chain tech. You've never seen his face in a magazine, but you've definitely used a product that moved through his software. The same attention he brought to global systems, he brought home to 2 daughters who would never be taught to wait for opportunity. Then there's Dr. Melanie Sinclair, trauma surgeon, mother, mentor, the woman who taught them what steady hands and long nights could build. She was the one who came home still wearing scrubs, sat down at the kitchen table, and corrected their homework in between answering hospital calls. She didn't preach strength. She modeled it. Together, the Sinclairs didn't raise girls who expected the world to be fair. They raised girls who knew how to be ready when it wasn't. By age 10, Imani could explain supply chain redundancy. Amara had already won her first statewide oratory competition. The topic was equity in American education. Neither of them were taught to raise their voice, but both knew exactly how to speak when it mattered. They flew often. Summer camps, tech expos, scholarships. Charles made sure they flew business class, not to show off but to reduce friction. No delays, no extra questions, no excuses. That was the plan anyway. Family dinners were filled with conversations about ethics, about legacy, about being twice as prepared just to be seen as competent. Their first boarding pass was laminated. Not for nostalgia, for documentation. This wasn't just a family with resources. This was a family that knew how power moved, and how easily it could shift when the wrong person was in uniform. Charles didn't raise his daughters to be feared, but he raised them to never shrink. Not in the classroom, not in a boardroom, and not at Gate C9. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, Gate C9. The flight was on time, the boarding area calm. Imani and Amara stood quietly, tickets in hand. Seats 7A and 7B, business class, pay confirmed, assigned by their father's executive assistant weeks ago. Their bags were small, 1 carry-on each, no checked luggage, no chaos, but the gate agent didn't see any of that. She didn't see the booking confirmation. She didn't see the travel history or loyalty status. She didn't even look at the boarding passes. What she saw, 2 black teenage girls unaccompanied. "Where are your parents?" It wasn't a question. It was an assumption. Amara responded, polite but firm, "We're traveling alone." The agent's eyes narrowed. She motioned with her hand, not inviting, not guiding. "Step over there." The girls stepped aside. No protest, no attitude, just confusion. They had done this before, multiple times. Not once had they been treated like this. They waited. The agent continued boarding others, adults, mostly white, some traveling solo, others in pairs. She scanned their tickets without hesitation. But Imani and Amara? Still standing by the stanchion like they didn't belong. After 5 minutes, Amara approached again. "We're in business class, seats 7A and 7B. The agent didn't respond. She waved over another employee. They spoke in low tones. Both glanced at the girls. Still, no one checked the system. Then a third person arrived, this time in uniform. A security officer. This wasn't standard procedure. There was no incident, no disturbance, no threat, but the presence of black skin, confidence, and premium seating, that was enough to be flagged. The officer walked toward them, slow and firm. "I need you two to come with me." Amara held up her phone. "We have our tickets. We're not doing anything." The officer's expression didn't change. "Step aside." People started watching now. The rustle of judgment moved through the terminal. Heads turned. A man in a blazer leaned back in his chair, smirking. A woman whispered behind oversized sunglasses. Still, no one spoke up. Imani looked at her sister, then down at her phone. She typed 4 words. "Boarding denied, no reason." That message went straight to Tokyo, where Charles Sinclair was finishing a strategic call with investors. Back in the terminal, things escalated. Another officer joined. Now 2 guards stood near the girls. They weren't yelling, they weren't resisting, but they were treated like objects to be repositioned. One officer placed a hand near Imani's elbow. She flinched, not because she was afraid, but because she knew what came next. "We didn't do anything," she said. No reply. The gate agent folded her arms. The second staff member avoided eye contact. One final sentence was thrown at them like an excuse, not an explanation. "We've had issues with teens trying to sneak into business class before." The assumption was complete. They weren't viewed as students, not as daughters of a CEO, not as ticketed passengers. They were seen as a problem. And problems don't get scanned in, they get removed. So they were walked down the terminal, calm, controlled, as if not resisting might be the only thing keeping it from becoming worse. Phones came out, not to help, just to watch. They were led to a side room. No one explained what was happening. No one asked for ID, no apology, no curiosity, no concern. The door closed, and the silence inside that room said everything. This wasn't about a policy. It wasn't about procedure. This was about perception. And they had been perceived as wrong from the moment they stepped forward. At 16, you're still forming your understanding of the world. Still learning how rules work. Still trusting that when you follow them, things will be fine. But Amara and Imani had done everything right, and still they weren't allowed to board. Because in that moment, right and wrong didn't matter, only skin color did. Thousands of miles away, Tokyo was already deep into its business day. Charles Sinclair sat in a glass-walled conference room, moments away from finalizing terms on the most critical partnership his company had negotiated in 2 years. Then his phone buzzed. 4 words, from Imani. "Boarding denied. No reason." He didn't ask what happened. He didn't call for details. He didn't wait for a follow-up. He stood, stepped out of the meeting, and dialed a number he knew by heart, the direct line to the chief operating officer of the airline. The same airline whose team had just physically removed his daughters from their flight. The same airline preparing to sign a $3.2 billion tech deal with Transsion Systems. No assistant, no gatekeeper, no middleman. When the COO picked up, his voice was upbeat, unaware. "Charles, everything's moving ahead. Legal's finalizing language now. You'll have full exclusivity." Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't repeat himself. He spoke clearly and just once. "We're out." There was silence, then confusion. "Sorry, what do you mean?" "Your team pulled 2 black girls out of business class this morning," Charles said. "Those girls are mine." The executive started talking fast, asking questions, denying awareness, offering to look into it. Charles didn't care. "You didn't know who they were," he said. "That's the problem." This wasn't a PR moment. There would be no press release, no meeting with the DEI team, no vague promise to do better. This was a boardroom execution, and Charles had just cut the cord. He didn't threaten, he didn't negotiate, he terminated. By the time the call ended, the legal team at Transion was already drafting the exit letter. Clause 14.3, Values Misalignment. That same document the airline had been celebrating for months, torn in half over a single phone call and a line they never saw coming. Within 30 minutes, word had started to travel. By the hour, executives were gathering for emergency calls. Someone pulled flight records. Someone else checked the incident log. Someone, finally, asked who Charles Sinclair actually was. And then someone in legal said it out loud. The entire deal is dead. 3 years of courting a company that had revolutionized logistics in Southeast Asia. 19 months of joint planning. Projected net gains in the hundreds of millions. All gone. Because someone decided that 2 black girls waiting to board a flight looked suspicious. And Charles Sinclair? He was already back in the meeting room, calmly reviewing the next deal. The news didn't break on Twitter. It didn't leak through a viral video. It came through email. The airline's board received a one-line notification just before sunrise. Effective immediately, Transion Systems is withdrawing from all negotiations. At first, no one panicked. Not yet. Executives thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, something that could be reversed with a few phone calls. But within the hour, the market responded. Stock prices dipped, then tumbled. And suddenly, there were calls. A lot of them. Board members dialed each other in confusion. Senior staff flooded the legal team with questions. Shareholders demanded updates. Analysts pinged internal contacts asking, "Why did Transion pull out? Was there an incident? Who authorized the termination?" Nobody had a good answer. Not yet. Then someone on the communications team found it. A leaked internal memo from the Dallas Airport Incident Report, flagged in HR. 2 minors removed from boarding area, possible policy violation, parental involvement escalated, identity of parent under review. That was all it took. Someone connected the names, someone connected the seats. Someone finally asked, "Who is Charles Sinclair?" And that's when it hit them. Charles Sinclair wasn't just the CEO of Transion, he was the deal. His company wasn't providing a service, it was building the infrastructure behind the airline's entire international logistics expansion. A cloud-based predictive routing system that would cut fuel costs, improve boarding efficiency, and scale their operations into Asia and Africa, starting next quarter. It was supposed to be the airline's future. Instead, it was gone. Because their gate agents hadn't scanned a boarding pass. Because they hadn't checked a name. Because 2 black girls didn't look like business class. And now the contract that was supposed to boost shareholder confidence? Dead. Publicly, the airline said nothing. Privately, panic set in. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Press response drafts were prepared. HR launched an internal investigation. Someone from legal suggested offering a formal apology. Someone else warned that doing that would admit liability. The COO, the same man Charles had spoken to, reportedly begged for a second chance. Charles didn't respond. Instead, Transion's legal team issued a short, unambiguous statement. "We no longer believe this partnership aligns with our company's core values." That line alone triggered a 9% drop in the airline's share price within 48 hours. It wasn't about bad press. It was about what it revealed. An executive partner had publicly walked away, not over profits, but over principle. That scared people more than a scandal, because if Transion could do it, so could other partners. Suddenly, other vendors started quietly reviewing their contracts. Investors flagged concerns about operational risk. Industry reporters began circling, not because of a hashtag, but because of the silence. No one at the airline had seen this coming. But maybe they should have. Because when you treat power like it looks a certain way, wears a certain suit, speaks with a certain accent, moves through life a certain color, you miss the people who actually hold it. And Charles Sinclair had never once needed to raise his voice. He just walked away and took billions with him. The airline didn't lose the deal because of a tweet. They lost it because they gambled on bias and didn't realize they were betting against the wrong family. What if they hadn't been Charles Sinclair's daughters? What if the names on those tickets weren't connected to a billion-dollar company? What if it had been two other black girls, same ages, same boarding passes, but flying economy, with no one important waiting at the other end? Would anyone have noticed? Would anyone have cared? Or would they have just become another story that never left the terminal? Because the truth is, this happens more than people think. It just doesn't always come with consequences. In 2018, a national study on racial discrimination in air travel showed that black passengers were twice as likely to be questioned about seat assignments, even when their tickets were valid. 4 times more likely to be flagged for suspicious behavior during routine boarding. None of that is new. It just rarely gets acknowledged unless the person affected happens to hold enough leverage to make people listen. And the girls at Gate C9? They had that leverage. But most don't. It's not always loud. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's a pause before scanning a ticket. Sometimes it's a fake smile masking an assumption. Sometimes it's asking black children for identification when their white counterparts breeze through untouched. And sometimes it's calling security, not because someone's a threat, but because someone looked out of place. People love to use the word professionalism, but too often, professionalism is just the filter racism uses to stay clean. It's the tool that lets a gate agent say, "just following protocol," when what they really meant was, "you don't look like you should be here." It's how systems protect behavior that would never survive if race were removed from the equation. And even for those who play by the rules, the ones who speak gently, dress sharply, never make a scene, there is no shield strong enough to keep them from being reduced to a stereotype by the wrong person with a badge. Amani and Amara followed every rule. They stood still, spoke clearly, showed their tickets. They did everything right. And still, they were treated like suspects in a space they paid to be in. Respectability doesn't protect us. Not when racism is built into the decisions, into the glances, into the silence of people watching and doing nothing. What happened to them wasn't an error. It was an outcome. The result of a system that keeps teaching people who's allowed to belong and who needs to be removed without question. Charles didn't tweet. He didn't post a video. He didn't go on cable news with a team of lawyers beside him. He didn't need to. He just withdrew the deal. No press conference, no hashtags. Just one internal notice from Transion's legal team citing a values conflict with the airline's organizational conduct. That was it. One sentence, $2 billion in projected revenue. Gone. Back at the airline's headquarters, panic had taken root. Executive calendars cleared for round-the-clock meetings. PR teams drafted multiple versions of an apology, one heartfelt, one defensive, one purely legal. A spokesperson released a bland statement: "We take all customer concerns seriously and are committed to learning from this moment." But the board knew it wasn't enough, because the damage wasn't just reputational, it was structural. This wasn't a social media backlash. This was a direct hit to their future. Charles didn't ask for anyone to be fired. He didn't name the employees involved. He didn't issue a single demand. He just walked away. And his silence? It was calculated in every corner of the corporate world. The DEI officer, who hadn't been consulted until now, was asked to draft a response. The HR department placed the gate agents on leave, pending review. An emergency diversity training session was scheduled, with PowerPoint slides and lukewarm coffee. It was too late, because Charles wasn't looking for symbolic gestures. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. He was holding up a mirror, and the reflection it gave back was undeniable. When a man like Charles Sinclair, a CEO, a Black father, a builder of global systems, quietly removes himself from your table, the silence says more than any headline ever could. His silence wasn't passivity, it was precision, and it was loud enough to shatter a billion-dollar glass wall. For years, executives like Charles have been told to be patient, to be diplomatic, to be grateful for the seat they fought 10 times harder to earn, and when they're disrespected, they're expected to smile through it, to educate, to explain, again. Charles didn't do any of that. He didn't teach them a lesson. He gave them a consequence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. They thought this would blow over, a procedural hiccup, a misunderstanding. A quiet footnote in the weekly report. But within 24 hours, it became something else. It became a case study. By the end of the week, it was a warning. On LinkedIn, Black executives began sharing quiet moments they'd never spoken aloud. Stories that didn't go viral, but stayed in their bones. One woman posted, "I've been that girl in line. First-class ticket, still told to step aside. I just didn't have a Charles Sinclair to call." Another wrote, "We dress the part, we speak their language, but we're still seen as exceptions, not expectations." The comment section filled with nods, fist emojis, and quiet affirmations. Not outrage. Recognition. Because this wasn't new. It was just recorded, reinforced, and made undeniable by the way Charles responded. Without shouting, without spectacle. Just accountability. Corporate Slack channels buzzed with side chats. "Did you hear about the Sinclair walkout? We need to make sure that never happens here. Start auditing our travel protocols immediately." One DEI manager at a tech firm in Chicago reportedly said during an internal review, "We can't afford a Sinclair moment." That's what they were calling it now. A Sinclair moment. Not a PR scandal, not a mistake. A moment when bias meets someone powerful enough to end the conversation and walk away. In law firms, advertising agencies, venture capital boards, the message echoed. You can't train away what you refuse to see. You can't apologize away what's rooted in expectation. You can't keep promoting equity in your marketing while your systems tell another story. Charles Sinclair didn't go viral, but his silence amplified thousands of voices, voices that had been waiting for someone to show what consequences really looked like. He drew a line. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't wait for applause. He made a decision. And the world, from first-class boarding gates to corner offices, was now watching that decision ripple across industries, contracts, and quiet conversations. Because once you know what a Sinclair moment looks like, you start asking who else might be ready to deliver one. Imani and Amara boarded their next flight in silence. No welcome, no apology, just two girls sitting in business class, carrying the memory of a moment that said, "You don't belong here." They didn't cry, they didn't rage, they just sat, back straight, eyes forward, and took off into a world that had just revealed how fragile dignity can be when it's filtered through the wrong lens. Something had shifted. Not just for them, for everyone watching. The airline to this day is still recovering. The merger deals they were banking on stalled. A competitor stepped into the market vacuum, quietly, quickly. And Charles Sinclair? He still hasn't spoken publicly. No interviews, no op-eds, no speeches, just continued work, just forward motion. And maybe that's the point. When you've built what Charles has built, when your presence alone reshapes boardrooms, you don't need to explain your worth. You just withdraw it. In certain corners of the internet, people began comparing him to Dana Caldwell, another name some of you may remember. Another Black executive, another boarding gate, another moment when power didn't look how the gate agent expected, and everything changed. Different name, same story. And that's exactly why it matters. Because if success, professionalism, and silence aren't enough to protect Black dignity, what is? What does it say about our systems when two girls can be dragged away not for what they did, but for what they looked like, even with boarding passes in hand? What does it say when silence and success still aren't enough to buy respect? If this story moved you, subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ. We tell the stories others try to overlook. And tell us where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. We love seeing this global community stand up for dignity, truth, and justice. And if you've seen something like this, if you felt it, quietly, in your own way, we want to hear from you. Your story matters too. Leave a comment. Be part of the conversation.